right. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. This is actually my first time in Dallas, so I had to get barbecue last night, which was amazing. I'm curious here how many people would identify themselves as a people manager of DevOps professionals, or SREs. Okay. And then how many of you would identify as an individual contributor, DevOps engineer, SRE? Okay, cool, about half and half. And I'm curious, how many of you have started or left a job in the last 12 months? Okay, some decent amount of hands. And how many of you has seen like big organizational changes in the last 12 months? Yeah. Yeah, the tech industry's kind of changed a lot. So what I want to do is kind of rewrite the rules of some of our practice and how we're thinking about some of our practice based on what's happening in the industry right now. And believe it or not, with the rise of AI, we do still need to talk to each other. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. How many of you have managed an incident or an urgent situation this week? Has anyone managed one today? So when we have an incident, and I think a lot of talks at our niche conferences end up preaching to the choir, right? Like we all believe in this stuff, we are the people that believe in it, and I want to try to shift today and share things from a bit of another different perspective. So this image that you're looking at is by a guy, Nipin Anand, and he has some great work. But he talks about how people can be looking out the same window and they see two very different things, right? You might look out the window and really see this red car that's sticking out the window, and your roommate might be looking out the same window and notice the bird. And this happens after incidents too, right? We all have the same window we're looking out of, but we're seeing different things. And we don't always capture all the different things that people are seeing, which means we miss the full picture. Most incident reviews at a lot of organizations end up being done in a vacuum by a small team that was most impacted, and it's just the engineering team, right? But they're maybe missing the context of CS, of PR, of marketing, of execs, of shareholders. And I think capturing that info also helps place all the onus off of DevOps engineers and SREs being the heroes in these situations. You know, I've definitely heard before, like, execs don't understand my work, they're doing the wrong thing, they don't know that going this route is going to take more time and it's going to damage us in the long run. But the exec also has context too. They have context on how their stock price is going, or if they need to do a raise in the near future, or how hiring is going. And as an engineer, you might not have all that context, right? And so it is tricky to be able to work together to surface some of that context, because a lot of these decisions are carefully made, even if they don't seem like that. One of these people is responsible for keeping the business afloat, and one of them is responsible for keeping some of the systems afloat. I also want to share this image from Richard Cook. Has anyone seen this before? No? Oh, great. Well, I love sharing it. So he has this image where he says there are things above the line and there's things below the line. And he says people working above the line of representation continuously build and refresh their mental models of what lies below the line. This activity is critical to the resilience of software companies and the principal source of adaptive capacity. And it's immediately apparent that no individual mental model can ever be comprehensive. Where I see engineers sometimes misread this, though, is that I think we have this tendency to think that we have the most context on things. However, I would caveat with this diagram that there are multiple different types of below-the-line work. It's not just the engineers, it's the folks in finance, it's the folks in marketing, it's the folks in sales. Everyone has their own below-the-line work. And they all require varying mental models in order to understand the complexity and keep the business running. Now, your job in DevOps changes depending on the business you work for. Every business has a different heartbeat. Every business has a different central thing they care about. And perhaps that central heartbeat and thing they care about actually maybe changed over time in the last year maybe, right? We may have always said, this is the thing that we have to do. I used to work at Netflix several years ago, and one of the things that we always cared about was this central heartbeat mechanism. But now, since I've left, Netflix actually supports live TV. And I know that is a completely different incident management system than it was back when I worked there, right? And that changes the mental model of the SREs and the DevOps engineers that have to keep those systems running. It benefits you and your organization for you to deeply understand that and embody that in your work, how that business is changing and how they're now gaining revenue versus how they were gaining revenue before. So I want to share a quick story of varying mental models, and this is a true story based on an organization I used to work in, and I was the engineer on call for this. So this company I used to work at had been around for a long time, and they had this feature flagging system. And it was a homegrown feature flagging system that had existed for forever, from my understanding. And it was also very flimsy. It was easy to mess something up in this feature flagging system. This was long before companies like LaunchDarkly existed. And someone was trying to fix it, right? And they sent out an email to engineering at the whole company and said, hey, we have a new feature flagging system that's being deployed on 11.2. Please no longer use the old one. There are multiple issues with the old technology, mainly the lack of type safety and maintenance. And they didn't just send out this email once, because as everyone in this room knows, I mean, I'm sure a bunch of us have had to be involved in change management. They sent it out via Slack, they sent it out via email, they alerted at lunch and learns, they did all this stuff. And the thing about the feature flagging system is people used to kind of hack it. So what they would do is they would deploy something, and if they realized there was an issue with their deploy, they could use the feature flagging system to turn it off by typing in a different feature flag number than what was available. And so essentially they could type in a number that didn't exist, and it would not be deployed in the system anymore. And so a lot of engineers would do this by just typing a really, really large number, right? Because we haven't gotten to that point yet, so there's no way that this feature flag could exist, so it won't actually turn on what I'm trying to deploy right now. And so then, the code wouldn't find it, and then it would move on. So after that email went out, the company has a month-long code freeze over the holidays, right? There's a lot of business risk going on, so we don't want to ship any changes. And when the developers are back from the holidays and back from the code freeze, they begin pushing their built-up changes, right? We've been working this whole time, we just haven't deployed anything. And so, an engineer goes into the feature flagging system and, let's see. I don't know why this is not playing, but the engineer goes into the feature flagging system and deploys it, and then quickly realizes, oh, I made a mistake. I'm going to type in this arbitrarily large number. And essentially what happened was they typed in a number so large that it was higher than the max integer that Java could parse. And it brought down everything. It broke so many things over that one change. And I was on call for this, and it was resolved so quickly. The engineer was super, super embarrassed that this happened. And it was so quick and kind of innocuous, even though it brought everything down. It was for such a small period of time that, it wasn't really to the organization worth investigating too much, right? It was engineer made a mistake, but I couldn't quite take that as the reality. And so I went and talked to the engineer, and I said, can you show me how you did this, how you turned off this deployment that you made? And they were like, well, you know how this system works. And I was like, yeah, but I would love to see it, right? Like, I just humor me for a second. And they pulled up their screen, and I was like, what is this? I actually hadn't even known the old technology existed at that point. And I showed them the new technology, and they said, I didn't even know there was a new system. So both of these processes were running simultaneously. And so then I went and talked to the team that had developed the new system. And they said, I didn't even know the old tool was still running. And it was like running on this single node, and people were still using it. And what I discovered looking at the organization was there was this big disconnect between engineers that had been at the org for a long time and how they received this messaging. It was so ingrained in them to use some of these old tools, whereas it was ingrained in the new engineers to use some of the newer tools. And communication mechanisms were also different between these groups of people. And so just going through that line of questioning really helped us align in the org between the more tenured engineers and the newer engineers on communication mechanisms, on how things get rolled out. And all it took was kind of that simple conversation around thinking, around the cognitive work, and around understanding it. And none of these things are good or bad. They're just data, as my friend Rian says. And this is what we're going to talk about today. There is so much data after incidents, and we are not always looking at data that can drive change in our organization. The data that we just looked at in that example, that can really drive change, right? It can drive change on how we communicate. It can drive change on how we deprecate internal systems. It can drive change on code freezes. All of those things are useful, and they're really about the cognitive work. So who am I? My name is Nora Jones, and I know I do not sing very well, but I do try very hard. I enjoy karaoke. I have been working in DevOps and SRE for my entire career, and I've mostly been an engineer. About 5.5 years ago, I left my engineering job at Slack, and I decided that I was going to be the founder and CEO of a new incident management company called Jelly. And I had it all figured out, right? I knew all the things that the industry was doing wrong with incidents. I had all these things that I kept repeating at organizations. And I also knew all the things that execs were getting wrong. So I was like, surely I will be a better exec because I know all the things that they're getting wrong. But what I quickly learned was how much my role as an engineer had been put into context being an exec. There's so many things that happen that you either can't share with your team or it's not productive to share with your team, and you have to develop a lot of trust. And so all of a sudden I kept having all these memories of incidents from the past where things just make sense. I was like, oh, that thing was probably happening, or that thing was probably happening. And I started realizing that, execs should really be in more incident reviews. They might not be able to share all the context, but there is context that they have. And if I was to go back to being an SRE now, or go back to being a DevOps engineer now, I actually think I might have a little bit better understanding of how I'm executing my job, of how I'm deciding what to work on, because as an exec, you are just completely tied to revenue. Like, that is your North Star, revenue, right? And it drives everything down. And especially with the changes in the tech industry recently, this is more king than ever. So Jelly was so much fun to work on, and we're still working on it. We actually got acquired by the leader in incident management last November, PagerDuty. And so you can see some screenshots of Jelly here. It's really a product that's meant to save you time in your incidents and reduce the coordination costs in them, and help you really develop context and cognitive work so that you can make them faster and improve from them faster later on. So this product actually exists within the PagerDuty Operations Cloud now. I'm still actively working on it. It's so much fun to be working on it at PagerDuty scale. But today I'm going to kind of talk about all the different perspectives I've been able to glean from sort of my wild experience, from going from IC to manager to IC to exec to product leader now. And so in DevOps, we react to incidents, but we don't always take time to learn from them in a way that builds organizational context. Has anyone ever seen a job wreck open up after a major incident? One of my favorite things to do is to look at, when a company has a major incident, go look at their careers website like a couple days afterwards, because you'll see a bunch of job postings. And they don't always last for a long time, but if it's like a big, wide-ranging incident, they're hiring, right? Incidents are expensive in their own ways, and not preparing for and being proactive around them is also damaging as well, and I think, as we all know. But I think what I've realized in between, you know, being an IC and being an exec is like there is such a communication gap between those two worlds. We don't quite understand each other. We are speaking different languages a lot of the time. But we are all impacted by incidents in our own way, and we can use those to drive more alignment and to drive more language. And, you know, we can't, like, understanding how you communicate, especially during urgent situations, there's so much data hidden in that. The way I speak to someone during an incident, or the way a customer service rep thinks, you know, to answer something, or how long an engineer waffles by themselves for 20 minutes at 2 a.m. before bringing in other people. Understanding all of those dynamics and the language people use during them actually really helps build organizational context. And if you have that organizational context and understanding, that leads to more resilient systems, which ultimately saves money. And so I want to talk today about how we do that, but we can't talk about anything in 2024 without mentioning Gen AI, so here's my mention. You can't automate learning. You can't automate the cognitive work with Gen AI. You still need to have context. You still need to have understanding built up, because you have to prompt it, right? You have to come up, it's not gonna read your mind, even though I think we all wish it would. But you can collaborate with it. And you don't actually want Gen AI to eliminate the cognitive work, because that's how orgs get better. Especially in incidents and in places that can be used to build expertise, we want to collaborate with this Gen AI, and we want to be very selective about the things we choose to have it automate. So we're all here because what does DevOps actually mean in 2024? And right now, the simplest way to put it is the value your organization places on the work, right? And how your business has changed. Maybe the definition of an incident has changed. Maybe the definition of an incident is so different that the CEO of your company is now getting text messages when your system is down from the CEO of another company that they sold to a long time ago. And maybe that's an incident, right? But that wasn't in your docs. That's not in your SLAs. That's not what you agreed to. But things change, right? And they shift, and we kind of have to shift and adapt with it. And the industry's changing, right? There's a lot that you can learn about your organization and influence it, the way it operates, through studying communication and through studying how that communication changes over time. You know, I was running a startup, and then last year we went from a 20-person company to a 1,200-person organization. We had very different styles of communication, and no one has bad intent. You have different styles of talking. You have different interpretations of what things mean, and it takes time to get used to those. But understanding how people communicate and really digging into why they're taking the actions they do can help you operate better, and can help you operate better together. And is anyone familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? We've seen this before? Yeah. So a lot of it is just showing, the most basic needs like air and food and water and shelter and clothing and, a sense of need for security allows for a lot of these other things to be built. And it's usually depicted as a pyramid with the most basic needs at the bottom and the advanced needs on top, but they kind of all interrelate. But if you're missing the bottom needs entirely, you are going to struggle to be effective at work. So if we're looking at, what has happened to the tech industry in the last couple years, we really went through a period where it was like growth at all costs. Hire, hire, hire. Let's hire so many people. Let's hire someone for everything. There's this random expert, that has a PhD that lives on this remote island, but I think we can get them over here. And then, it's kind of shifted to revenue is king and being cash flow positive is king, and trying to understand why some niche expertise was hired that doesn't have anything to do with the business. And then developers were making a lot of tool and process decisions, but that's kind of shifted to mandates for cost efficiency, buying decisions at the C-suite. There was highly valued technical creativity, and now creatively leveraging AI is highly valued. There was a lot of comfortability in businesses, more room to experiment. Maybe a lot of businesses are facing more competition, more paranoia, and maybe there was a clear definition of an incident, but now there's a new definition of an incident because the business has shifted and things have grown. And it's our responsibility to grow with it. But some of those shifts can seem so quick and so drastic that it affects our basic needs at the bottom. So we're not feeling as creative anymore. We're feeling a little overmanaged. We're feeling like we have to report metrics a lot more. And we are just in a time of adaptation. And I encourage folks to really be curious about it internally. Learning from incidents in communication asks us not why something happened, but why did it make sense? And in order for these questions to be able to take place, there does need to be some element of psychological safety. If you just go ask someone, why'd you push that button? They'd be like, what do you mean, why'd I push that button? I thought it was the right button to push, right? Or they might get defensive. But that can actually be a really valuable conversation. Like, hey, Sally, I noticed that you pushed that button. I'd love to learn more about your thought process behind that. I have to push that button sometimes too, and I was just wondering how you decide that you're going to do that. There are different ways you can word things that can help elicit and take people's fear response down and help you learn more about their mental tasks. So my talk is split into 3 parts. One is how expertise gets built in orgs. 2, we're going to go through a tale of 2 incident reviews. And 3, we're going to talk about what's next. And we got started a little late here, so I think I have a little bit more time. So let's talk about developing expertise. And I want to talk about how expertise gets built in organizations. So we'll go back to the very beginning, the genesis of expertise amongst individuals in an organization. So in the beginning of a company, it's a new startup, maybe they just got a nice small round of funding, they're pre-product market fit, they don't have a lot of users yet, they don't really have incidents because they don't have users, but they do have things they need to coordinate on. They have their own level of incidents. Maybe an incident is, this customer is going to sign tonight if we all build this thing, They have things that make you drop everything and fix the thing right then. And so here are 4 people that are working at my fictitious company, and I very creatively named them Person A, Person B, Person C, and Person D. Person A, is thinking about a new launch that they have. They say, I like to use new technology to make this project go faster. It's going to set us up for success in the long run. Person B says, all right, if it'll get us there faster and more reliably, let's do it. The primary objective right now is launch. So they don't have time to, document all these decisions and go through this design review process. They're in a small company and time is of the essence. And person C says, is it easy to use? I'm not familiar with it. And person A says, I will teach you all. It's fairly straightforward. So you guys know how in video games when you meet a new boss and it's like there's a new challenger approaching, you know, person A is that new challenger approaching, but really they're the new expert approaching. And I don't think they realized that those were their final last words they had about the system, because now for the remainder of their tenure, they will be the go-to de facto expert on this part of the system. And this yellow highlight shows that they are the expert. And so person A said, I'll teach you all, it's fairly straightforward. So they teach person C a little bit, and they teach person B even a little bit less. Person D is off doing other things. They don't need everybody to know this new technology. And so months pass, and their launch was actually a huge success. The company's booming. There's a lot of generated demand for the project, and the new technology is going really great in supporting this project. And the company's doing so well that they can actually hire a lot more people because they need to be able to keep up with the demand. And there's 1,000 things to ramp all these new people up on. New technology is just one of those things. So the usage of new technology also expands with the people in the system. So the understanding of new technology when there were 4 people is not the same as when there's this many people now. And so person A says, okay, fine, I will be the expert again, and everyone around them assumes the same. But what's actually happening is the expertise that person A thought they had suddenly isn't as full anymore. And it actually looks a little bit like this. Now this is dangerous because all of their colleagues might think that they have this much expertise. They might think they even have this much expertise. But as the system expands, and when I say system, it's not just technology, it's the people, it gets more complex, and you can't actually hold it all in your head anymore. So I want to share David Wood's theorem. As the complexity of a system increases, the accuracy of any single agent's own model of that system decreases rapidly. So the single agent in this system is person A. And so their understanding of the technology is actually decreasing very rapidly. Now, what happens is an incident occurs. And person C is on call. And they remember, oh, I used to work with person A on this. So they bring person A in, and a few other people join as well, and they resolve it fairly quickly. But if you've ever been a person A before, you are a hot commodity in your organization. You are busy. It's not just new technology. There's 1,000 things that you are getting pulled into. And it was a really quick incident, so you don't actually have time to attend the incident review. So an incident review occurs. It only involves a small group of people. It's done hastily. Management gets this high-level report with high-level metrics and indicators on the incident like MTT star, root cause, etc., but they don't have time to attend the incident review either. And engineers on the team most involved had their own conversations about the event. Neighboring teams don't learn much beyond the higher level report that went to management, and everyone just moves on. Parties engaged in incident response as it's happening have very different goals and priorities. The CEO's goal might be to get back to that CEO that texted them. The salesperson's goal is probably to get that doc signed at that very night. The CS person's goal is to keep that account in the green. The engineer's goal is to keep the system up according to their SLAs and according to their metrics. But these things are changing all the time, and they're very dynamic based on the situation. And there might be this gap in understanding between these two worlds. And so this expertise over time actually dwindles when it's not invested in. And it gets into dangerous territory because no one is investing in it. And maybe it's just running on its own, maybe it's fine, and maybe person A gets pulled in occasionally, but the scary part is people aren't aware when it's dwindled. And over time, Person A gets pulled into almost every incident that involves this new technology. And as they manage it, the organization grows and grows, and more people are hired around them with limited knowledge. And they have a lot going on, so they don't have time to teach new people about it. So they just keep responding to the incidents and then moving on to do other things. So since new technology was added, the company adds a lot more customers, the company has higher demands, the scope of Person A's role grows, the company hires a lot. Person A has less time to teach people about the technology they implemented. Person A just does the work instead. Layoffs occur, Person A leaves. Where did that expertise go? Even that small amount of expertise that they had. Person A is a bit of a single point of failure there. And they're great, and everyone in their organization would be like, Person A is great, and Person A knows they're great, right? They're the hero. Maybe they're just a little bit burnt out now. But we're not setting up the structures in our organizations to disseminate this expertise. We instead really lift this person up, right? We look at these people and we say, I want to be Person A. I actually worked in one organization where every time this particular engineer would join the incident channel, people would react with the Batman emoji. And this person wasn't on call in a lot of incidents, but resolved all the incidents. And they were a great human. They were so fun to work with, but they saved the day on everything. And all the younger engineers wanted to be just like them. And it's great, they had a lot of skill sets, but they weren't disseminating them. They'd just like be Batman and just resolve a thing, and you didn't know how or why. They were just magic. And so what does that teach other people in your organization to do? To be magic. To almost, not share the things that they're experts in. And we don't always recognize that we're doing this. And I don't think a lot of folks in organizations recognize the value of disseminating this expertise, the criticality of it. But you can't meaningfully lift up your entire organization without looking at the cognitive work, which is itself work. And this work is a new muscle to develop, like saying, I don't know, asking someone for clarification, telling someone they're wrong, not being sure, having your boss loitering around, being a boss loitering around. There is all cognitive work that goes into a lot of these things, and figuring that out really helps us run a little bit more efficiently. So I want to jump into part 2. I'm just going to grab some water. So I'm going to take you through a semi-true account of 2 incidents. And spoiler alert, they are the exact same incident. This is based off an incident that I worked in a past life as an engineer, and it really helped me underscore the value of studying cognitive work through the lens of incidents, and just how much data we're really leaving on the table when we don't look at certain things. So the first investigation I'll take you through was the first incident review for this. It was kind of done hastily, and it was all the findings that came out of it. The second investigation is the same incident, but with fresh eyes, a different perspective, and a new review. So we are going to jump into the technical specifics of this incident, so I ask folks to put their nerd caps on for a second. So investigation 1 is a seemingly innocuous incident that didn't have much customer impact and didn't deserve or have time for a thorough postmortem. This happens all the time. Have you been in this situation before? Yeah, it's trade-offs. So it was innocuous. They took a templated approach to a post-incident review. It was completed by the members of the team most involved in the incident. The purpose was to file and report. We're too busy for anything else. And so the summary looked like this. And this was the summary given to execs. A change was made in some of the search infrastructure tooling, which updates the search index to look at every day. We were able to recreate the issue soon after it had been reported, and engineering was able to track down the problem and fix the bad configuration. Due to the nature of the bug, no pre-processing work had to be done for search to be functional again. And then a more detailed summary for folks that want to go further down the page. The search index is split into 2 collections. One large collection for the older SKUs and 2 to 3 collections for recent SKUs, 1 per day for newly created SKUs. Each collection is individually submitted for reading or writing, since search queries are typically read from all collections from a given vendor. We employ a feature called collection read alias, which lets us query from collections using one name. As new daily collections are created, typically done 2 days in advance, they're added to the read alias. Due to a bug in our tooling introduced the week before, the newly created daily collections were not being added to the read alias. Since collections are created and added to the alias 2 days in advance, the first collection to be affected by the bug was 3 days ago. So it was a latent bug that was hanging out. And then there's a timeline, and I know we've all seen an incident timeline like this. Bug introduced in Python tooling. The December 6th collection is created and not added to the alias. Newly created SKUs start going into the December 8th alias. Incident channel starts based on customer reports. Search team's paged and begins work. So we can see that this is 2 days after the bug was introduced. And then issue with elevated error rates is red herring. Borked broker, potential cause. Borked broker ruled out. Misconfiguration and read alias identified as cause. Configuration is fixed. Fix is confirmed. Fix is applied to the index file. And then it goes into the impact. All e-commerce users had a degraded search experience for the next 20 minutes. And then contributing factors. Lack of type system or static analysis in code. Alert that would have detected this is also broken. I think you could write this about any incident that's ever happened in the tech industry, right? Like a version of these bullets. Also, what does lack of mean? This is, pretty normative language. It's probably normal to the person that's writing it, but if I'm not the writer of the document, or even if I'm on a neighboring team, or if I'm a new engineer, I don't know what lack of means. Surely I know it was insubstantial. And next I see, a counterfactual, alert that would have, right? We're telling a story here that didn't exist. It's a fictitious thing that happened in a fantasy land. If it would have, it would have. If I'm trying to learn from this report, I'm not going to get insight on how it didn't and how the alert was implemented. What went well? Fairly quick fix. Again, fairly quick. I saw that it was 20 minutes. Is that good or bad? I've worked at 20 minutes or companies where 20 minutes is really bad. I've worked at companies where 20 minutes is actually a great day because everything was on fire. And so I don't know what this means in this situation. Alert that should have caught the misconfiguration was also broken. How we got lucky, and how we got lucky is one of my biggest gripes in post-incident reports because it sort of makes you stop. And it doesn't totally dig further into how things happened. It says it happened during a low traffic time and not many users were impacted. And this kind of language isn't totally helping the cognitive work. It's not helping me understand how people thought about the incident, how people were deciding which actions to take. Action items, fix the bug, fix the alert, check all of our alerts. Great. You could also put these action items on any incident. The organization is less likely to have gotten ROI out of the time they took spending on this incident review. And if I'm reading this, it feels like it's a defense mechanism. It feels like it's written to show someone in management that, they looked into it. It's a box checking exercise without a lot of value. And it doesn't show the beneficial coordinative work. The smooth, coordinated effort was indicated to be taking place, but was never actually mentioned. And so I want you to think about what kind of questions you have about incident one. I think for me, it's the audience. We have so many different audience of post-incident reviews. It's a lot of pressure to write for all of them, right? So we write for a mixture of them. But we have the customer, we have maybe our execs and our board, we have our direct boss, we have downstream systems. They all want different context about the incident, but all of that context is important. So what are we missing? We're missing the context on the cognitive work. And I wonder what the purpose of the incident reviews like this are. Are we actually getting value out of it? And I want to note that AI cannot solve this for you. And I want to share this quote recently from Arman Dadgar, who's the co-founder of HashiCorp. He says, "Context is the key between where we are today and where we want to go in the future." And we need this context in order to keep building up our organizations. There's so much history in our organizations behind why things were done and how things were done. And building on top of that history really helps us drive effective change and develop more resilient systems. So switching to investigation 2, it's always a little bit more complex than it appears. So again, same incident, but taken under a new lens. This was conducted by an engineer outside of the main team, fresh perspective. They jumped straight into the cognitive work. They included evidence from previous deploys. They included teams impacted but not previously involved in the timeline. Like if we're looking at the timeline, it looks like only the search team is involved. And it informed team members about system dynamics. So it was written with the thought, hey, this maybe will be an onboarding guide later on. So they had this kind of new mission in mind. And the purpose was to engage the audience and to be read. So some sources of data they looked at were people, responders, execs, support. They also looked at dev tools and reporting systems like runbooks, dashboards, log files, written communications like Slack, MS Teams, and email, and video like Zoom and Hangout. And when you're reviewing incident, the first step is to see where all that incident data came from. So a big source of this incident data is language. And we happen to be talking about this incident in channels. And so I want to actually jump into the channel where this incident was noticed. So Justin here says, we're receiving requests right now related to the key change beta release. And if we think back to the old timeline before, that was started on December 2nd. But what I see here is November 23rd. So we can go all the way back to when some of this project was initiated. And what is missing is between November 23rd and November 30th, the search team actually reported several pager-driven alerts on search not working due to invalid and revoked keys, which created a source of confusion and fatigue for the search team. So Justin had been working on this launch. It was a big product launch, and this is what was happening. So they introduced PR22, which was introduced to avoid the noisy alerts the search team was getting as a result of the change, and to not alert when a key is invalid, because a bunch of the keys were invalid, so it was a false error. And then a partition was created, which we knew about from the last incident review, to hold indices. These are automatically created 2 days in advance. And then there was a separate PR that got created. And this was introduced to not update read aliases for collections during a migration. So it was a result of a migration taking a minute longer than necessary, some cleanup work. I think we've all been good Samaritans before where we're working on a project and we see something that could be cleaned up that's a little bit unrelated, but we're like, yeah, I'll be nice. And you throw it in there. So that happened. And then between December 4th and December 6th, errors were detected, but they were not paged on due to PR22. And this is where our queries actually began failing. And so now we're going to jump into the spam detection channel where customer service representative Connor Jacobs happens to be online separately fighting bots that are spamming our e-commerce website. So Connor says, I'm working on automation that should stop these bots once and for all. You know, he's kind of talking to himself. We've all done this in a Slack channel. I'm posting here for posterity. Okay, I'm deploying now. I'll run through all the tests once it gets to staging. So remember, this thing isn't an incident yet, right? He's just doing this other thing over here. It's not related to the incident. He says, okay, add to cart is looking good. These tests pass. Moving on to search next. That's weird. Search isn't working or returning a SKU I just added in test. But, you know, the changes he made weren't related to search, so he's moving on to the second deploy and assumes it's just a weird error. We'll run through the tests on this one too. And so finally, we get to the customer experience channel where Natalie says, hey, I'm receiving some reports that customers can't access search results for the item in the promo emails that we sent out yesterday. So there's some new detail. I didn't know there was a promo email being sent out from the last incident review. And so it appears that there's no engineering incident, but you know, people are getting upset. So I'm looking into it and messaging them. And then it appears to not be receiving search results for all other SKUs added before last week. So it seems like it's not an obvious down for search. So Connor and Natalie work really closely together, and he's like, oh, I was just running these tests. You know what? Like, I think this was the same issue I was seeing earlier. I'm going to page the search team. I can't figure out auto paging, so I'm just going to manually page them, which I think pages all of them, but oh well. And then the incident channel is finally created. So we see all this context before the incident channel got created, which is giving us a lot of information on how we really got lucky here, right? So all these people joined the channel at the same time. Wow, the search team is on top of it. I wonder why coordination was so smooth. I wonder why they all hopped on. And I will note this was after hours for all of them because they were on a different coast. And then looking into it, oh, Connor has actually been here for over 6 years. He's the founding customer support engineer. He was also Check's Note's 7th employee. So it's no wonder he was able to get all these people in a room so fast. You know, I'm starting to understand a little bit more about how we got lucky. And when we're finally in the incident channel, we can see how much of our incident timeline we pulled together before the channel. And we can see just how quickly Nat and Justin are able to put together the results because they had context on and were involved in the pull request before. So the people that had context on how they worked happened to be in this channel. Oh, and spoiler alert, neither Nat nor Justin were actually on call for this event. And so we finally actually resolve it. And Justin realizes it's related to the PR23, a variable named update aliases overrode the method update aliases, UG Python. And this actually, you know, makes me want to dig deeper on the nuances of Python in this org and why it was used in this code base. And then we can put together sort of a visual timeline, right? Like, which can be a little bit more engaging than a line-by-line linear timeline. Putting together a visual representation of where people spent time can help you understand what's hard for them, and it can help you understand where to dig into. So some key takeaways here were that there were multiple notions of what it meant for search to be working. Incident handling was achieved by team cohesiveness and collaboration. Changing code with alert has risks. There was a lot more that we could understand about the system via this incident review and the people that were involved in it. I think the big thing missing from the first one was the people, but the people are part of the system. And understanding how they think allows us to create more people like them that work just as smoothly and efficiently. And so there's always multiple roles and experiences to study, multiple people to invite to the meeting, and an incident review can help you gain context on everyone else's line of expertise and their sharpen. So what's next? Well, what I hope you take from this talk and what I hope you take action on this year, whether you're person A, person B, person C, or their manager, is to make some of your incident reports engaging, really get people actually reading them. And don't just, write it to file it. Don't just forget about it. Like, there are things that you can extract from it that will build the resiliency of your systems. And so some tactical steps, who needs to be involved in the review? Well, more than just people and teams in the incident, you can consider folks such as frontline support, dependent teams, future team members, project managers. I've attended an incident review as a customer before. That's kind of fun. And the wider you share your findings and the more they apply to these audiences, the more opportunities you'll have for learning, the more opportunities you'll have for improvement, and the more opportunities you'll have to drive change and actually save money in your organization. Now, I talked a little bit about cognitive techniques, but some quick techniques are establish rapport, get people talking and feeling like an expert, go from general to specific, use prompts, learn and adjust. And we have actually a free guide online on this, on how to elicit some of these techniques, but you can throw softball questions to get folks feeling comfortable. Like, from your perspective, can you explain how the incident happened? How did you get brought into the event? Have some specific questions ready. Ask for clarification as needed. So it's better to have people in the incident review over-explain something that you knew rather than to make an assumption about it. So think back to that feature flag story earlier. And this little cartoon on the side is from a seminal paper from Richard Cook on coping with complexity that illustrates that there's many paths to success or failure. And as someone facilitating the document, the meeting, the understanding, your role is to surface all the complexities involved in handling the event so that you can drive a richer discussion and you can drive richer change, right? Those action items we saw from incident 1 are not great, right? And it's actually going to be costly for the organization to spend time on those because they're not very well thought through. And so you can save yourself money now by investing a little bit more in understanding. And this can lead to a lot of continuous learning, like onboarding and orientation, professional development, meta-analysis. I've seen orgs use this for headcount, even reorgs, right? Like, we have a miss of understanding over here, but look how critical this system is. It can be used for planning promotion cycles, quarterly planning, unlocking knowledge silos and gaps, and background research for new initiatives. It can be data points. So what does it mean to be done? A well-written report or incident review should have ongoing value to your organization. And because your understanding is going to evolve as your system evolves, as your incident evolves, you might revisit other reports and start linking them to each other. I've seen examples of reports where someone came back 2 years ago and added it as a resource to the next report. And you can track who's reading these, who's engaging these. And you can drive actual change. And some of the tips I recommend are use more than the SEV level to drive an incident review. Use what's anomalous in your organization. Did 300 people join this incident channel and usually only 10 do? That's indicative of something that maybe needs a bigger incident review. Make it engaging, create a record, and schedule and make time for learning. Don't break your promises to learn. And ultimately, put the responsibility of running the review outside of person A. They do not have the ability to understand why they're doing what they're doing without someone else facilitating the discussion. And working to understand how experts think and talk creates more experts. It helps them understand each other. It's how you scale these people. It's how collaboration improves. And it's how work gets done more productively. Thank you.